Hello and welcome back to another episode of 7 Minutes of Precision. Today I am joined by Eric Higgins, the owner of Ammolytics, and I'm pretty excited about this episode because I think we're about to learn a lot of interesting stuff about reloading and powders and all these things. Eric, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Sharif.
Thank you. All right, so tell us, what is Ammolytics?
Yeah, Ammolytics is a project that I put as a way to explore as what I call like citizen science. So I'm not like an official scientist by trade or by education, but anybody who shoots competitively or just for fun, if you go to the range, you'll hear people talking about a variety of different topics. They'll talk about things like barrel harmonics and nodes and uh, you know pressure signs and all these things. And
Yeah.
then you'll start to hear like here are some different ways that you can use to manage it based on like what they've seen over time.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who's worked, in the software industry for a long time in data science and has always been interested in this sort of thing, I just like to apply a little bit of skepticism and see like, can I reproduce these results? Just following the scientific method to see like, can I do this in such a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can share the results of what I learned and the way that I did it so that other people can try and reproduce my results and then just share like what I learned from that. And I do it without judgment. I'm not trying to prove myself right or wrong. I just want to like try and find what the actual truth is and explore that. So I've written a number of experiments over the years, and that's really just what I do with analytics. Is just like exploring my own curiosity as it applies to precision shooting, competitive marksmanship, and reloading.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you hear things and it's like more like personal belief from people who had one time an experience about something specific and then they believe it and they believe that this is science at this point. And if you don't test it or check that it is always being reproduced, then there's not really a truth to it.
Yeah, in the industry we call that anecdata.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in reloading, especially because especially when you get into reloading, you want to get into all the details. You want to understand as much as you can. And some people, like you said, do believe things and believe it's science.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just try to apply a little bit of rigor when I do it and produce everything. Like I document everything that I do, and I upload it all to GitHub so people can see all the data and the approach that I took, so they can like, it's always if anyone's gonna apply the same level of skepticism to what I did, I would like to make just document and like produce everything I possibly can and publish it all so that they can like tear it apart. That's great. I just want to learn from the process so we can try and find what the actual truth is.
Yeah, yeah. Do you get a lot of people coming back with results about the test that you have done, similar or had different results?
I do get people who try to reproduce the same results. They are really interested in just like setting up a similar experiment setup that I use, which is
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody come back to say like, "Hey, I tried this and I got different results than you did." But they will sometimes, share like different resources that they've seen where they say, "Hey, this seems to conflict. Do you want to talk about it?" I'm happy to hop on calls with people and have these discussions. But usually, like if I see something, like maybe I missed something, and that's great, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to publish like a follow up article, just to, like call, like, "Hey, like this is where I made a mistake. This is what we learned. Let's find a path forward to try and incorporate that."
And what's your background? You said you worked in software a little bit.
I did, yeah. So, well, as it applies to analytics and competitive shooting, I'll pull in like the full background. So, I'm from a small town in Northwest Ohio called Port Clinton, and it happens to be where the national matches are. So, Camp Perry is the location. It's owned by the Civilian Marksmanship Program. It's a government
Okay.
organization in the United States, and this is where they hold the national matches every year.
Mm-hmm.
So one year when I was a teenager, my dad took me there to watch my uncle shoot and compete in the national matches. And I believe he was shooting an M1 Garand. And I don't know how far away the targets were, but I saw them. I was like, oh, those look really small. And they were just really far away. And he was shooting iron sights prone, this M1 Grand. And later I saw them bring up on the truck like all the backer boards for the targets. And they're like 6 foot by 6 foot. They're massive. And I had no idea as a teenager that like you could shoot something without a scope that far away and like actually hit what you're aiming at. And so it was that experience combined with like in school, like in high school, I excelled in like physics and math. Those are the things that I just found really interesting. And I
Hmm.
remember we did this one experiment as a group in physics where you had to like roll a ball bearing down a ramp, and you had to stop it at the end of the ramp, but you had to time it with a stopwatch and then predict where that ball bearing was going to land after it like flew off the ramp. And my group did so well that the ball bearing like landed right in the middle of the cup and bounced right out. We still got an A in the project, but like just it was so the genesis for me was like kind of these combined experiences, excuse me, of like understanding like how physics work and wanting to apply that to the world, and then
Hmm.
like the competitive marksmanship aspect, and like just kind of combining those and exploring, how is it that we can predict like where this bullet is going to fly, and can we do better to make sure that like we fully understand every little thing that impacts the bullet's trajectory and what it's going to do in flight so that we can do better as competitive marksmen. So it's been a long journey for me. Um, I did work in software. I worked in Silicon Valley for over 10 years now, and I learned a ton from the people who work there about like technology and what we can do with software and data analysis. And when I was living in the Bay Area and working in tech, I also drove up to Sacramento once a month to shoot competitively at like a PRS style matches. This is before PRS is what it is today, and
Hmm.
we shot out to 1,000 yards. And when you go and shoot 100 yards, you like get really good and like, oh yeah, I'm awesome. But then you shoot further distances and further distances, and like once you get to 800, like this is getting really hard. Then anything past 800 is like, oh man, like all bets are off. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore because you can barely even see what you're shooting at.
Yeah.
And it just reinforced in a sort of like re-sparked that for me. So I've just been like going really hard on the articles that I write for Ammolytics and just exploring all these topics as deeply and in new ways that I haven't seen done before, and applying all these things that I've learned from different industries and bringing them to the competitive marksmanship field.
And at what age did you start shooting competitively?
Let's see. I didn't start shooting competitively until I was in, I think I would say my 30s, when I lived in the Bay Area and we drove up
Hmm.
to Sacramento to shoot at those PRS style matches, and that's like when it really hooked for me.
Hmm.
And then fast forward a few years, my wife and I moved up to Portland, Oregon, where I live now, and a buddy of mine from that I've known from high school. He also grew up in Port Clinton. He going back to our hometown to shoot in the national matches. He's like, dude, you have to come check it out. It's really cool. So I had started flying out with all my equipment, all my gear, my rifles to go and shoot at the national matches. And again, like you meet so many great people. So that's when I started shooting like service rifle, high power sling. So you shoot an AR-15 style. If you're not familiar with the setup, you shoot an AR-15
Okay.
with a sling and like a shooting jacket,
Hmm.
and you shoot prone, sitting, and standing from 300 yards out to 600 yards. And you can
Okay.
do iron sights or a scope. The scope only goes up to 4.5 power. That's like what's allowed for that style of matches. It's really challenging, especially at that range in Camp Perry, because it's really windy. It's right on the lake, but it is so much fun. So I just find myself like going down the rabbit hole that I think a lot of competitive shooters do of like, was that was that like 9 or that 8? Was that me? Or like did the gun or the ammo do something weird? And then you sort of like start to spiral. And like that's again, like I get the opportunity to sort of apply the data science and all the techniques that I've learned to try and figure out like, was that me or was it something else?
And did you start reloading about the same time, or it took you a few years before you started getting in the reloading rabbit hole?
Yeah, I started reloading when I lived in the Bay Area and was shooting in those PRS style matches. That's when I got my first bolt action rifle.
Hmm.
Actually bought it. It was a Remington 700, which is what everyone was getting at that time. I bought off a friend who has become like a lifelong friend, and he and I drove up to those matches in Sacramento together. So after you get like the bolt action, you read everything you can, and it's like, oh, you have to reload if you're going to get more precision out of your gun. So I started reloading and getting all the equipment, and that's obviously evolved over time, and just the way that we reload has evolved significantly over time. So back then, everyone was using the Charge Master, and that was like the best thing you could possibly get.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's evolved from there. So I do still reload, uh, but yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit when I first got my firearms license. I was young. I wanted to get an AR. They were still legal in Canada, and I wanted to get a handgun. And for some reason, I think it was a budget reason, I ended up getting a bolt action rifle. And since then, like I still got a handgun afterwards. I got a shotgun, and everything, but I've been hooked with like precision shooting and long range shooting because I think it's so rewarding when you do all like these studies and understand everything before you go shoot, and then when you go shoot, everything applies and everything works like you learn it. So it's not just shooting. There's a lot that happens before shooting and even after shooting, right?
Yeah, tons of prep work before and tons of after action analysis
Yeah,
afterward, just to see like what could I have done better? What do I want to try next time? And I think that that makes the biggest difference, at least for me, is having a plan of like what do I want to try and do today? What do I want to apply that I learned from last time? And this is especially true, it has been especially true for me shooting like high power service rifle, because you're on a timer. You don't get to just show up and like have as long as you want to shoot that match. Like even
yeah.
prep, you have like 2 minutes for prep, and you
Hmm.
have to have all your gear in the right place. Otherwise, you're going to be like stressed out, and all that stress raises your blood pressure, which means like that rifle is going to be moving a lot more than you want it to be. So you really have to be calm and feel like you are in control and prepared to do everything you need to do and everything right where it needs to be so that like the match can go as smoothly as it can for you.
It's not only your heartbeat that goes up, you start forgetting the basics, right? So
Yeah.
how to get a proper position, you start forgetting it, and then you look at yourself and you realize I have a very bad position. No wonder everything is not working, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it starts to compound, right? Then you start to force it, you're stressed, you're rushing, and then like you're gonna have a bad match. But those are the kinds of things like it's actually helpful to have one of those experiences that go wrong because you're gonna
Yeah,
learn a ton from it. And
yeah.
just try and write down. That's what I do. I just try and write down everything I did or do like a record a voice memo just to say like this is oh man, like I was really stressed out. This went wrong. My magazine was upside down and I tried to put it in the wrong way, whatever happens to be, just to make sure that next time you feel prepared, you can do it, have a better match.
Yeah, so I was shooting a match last weekend in New York, and I started okay, and then I think it was the fourth stage, and then everything is going wrong, and I don't understand what's happening, and it takes me a while until I figure out it's my muzzle brake that has come loose, right? And now all my dope is all over the place. But that time from when I had problems until I figured it out, it was so frustrating because I'm just like thinking on like, is it my scope? Is it my rings? Is it my top rail? Everything. And obviously it's not that, it's the muzzle brake. So luckily I was able to figure it out. It's an easy fix, right? I tightened it back, zeroed, and then I was back again. But it's one of those things where like now I learned before every match I have to do a full equipment check, make sure that
Yeah.
everything is tight, I have everything in the right place, everything is working, because when it's on the match time, that's it. There's no recovery, right? Or
Right.
you can recover as much as you can, right?
Yeah, I have a similar experience story to tell, which is when I was shooting those matches in Sacramento. Um, I was having a similar experience. Like my rounds, like they were not hitting where I thought they were, and I was like, I know I'm shooting well. Like this is not as so far of it. It was like 400 yards. Like I can do 400 yards. What's going on here? And I realized that the scope rail had come loose. Like not the
Mm,
rings, not the scope itself, but the rail. So I was like in the middle of a match. It was like you could hear it shaking around. In the middle of a match, I had to like unbolt it and then like tighten those back down, then put it back on.
yeah,
And it's interesting, like from that experience, like my scope rails will never come loose again because it's the kind of thing that I pay really close attention to. And I have this whole procedure with how I clean the screws and apply a certain amount of lubricant to make sure that they're never going to come off because like it happens to you one time, like
exactly.
never again.
That's exactly what I was thinking when it happened. I was like, it has to be the scope, right? My dope is wrong. Everything. I didn't think about the muzzle brake, so I checked the top rail, checked everything is tight, and then I hold my rifle from the muzzle brake, and then I see my rifle just twisting. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense now.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. All right. So back to Ammolytics. You said you started your reloading or your shooting competitively and reloading in about your early 30s. When did you start Ammolytics, or when did you start to decide, or when did you decide you want to do something more in depth?
Yeah, it's a good question. So just to set the timeline, so when I was in my 30s, doesn't give you a timeline of when that was. So this was I started shooting competitively and doing reloading back in let's say 2009, around that timeline.
Hmm.
So I started Ammolytics again just as an experiment to like write out what I was doing and what I was learning from these experiments. And I think my first article went up in like 2017 or 2018. And it was so interesting because there's a thing that I really, really want to build, which is kind of like software to help me understand like all the different aspects and track like all the different data sets that go into a competitive match. And like, if you think about all the different like major components of a match. There's your rifle and the whole
Mm-hmm.
weapon system, like the rifle, the brakes, the scopes, all that stuff. So like, the weapon system is one component. There is the ammunition, which is like the bullet, the powder, the shell, the primer.
Mm-hmm.
There is the target that you're shooting at, which hopefully is static and it's not shooting back at you most of the time. There is the environment, which is like it could be the wind, it could be the sun, it could be dust blowing. And then last is you, the shooter, like your human body, which does play a role. So all these things like play a role. And we could put sensors on all these different things and collect a bunch of data because like a competitive shooting match like is a data rich environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about it like if a shot goes wrong, if it doesn't land where I expected it to, like not knowing is the thing that will always bother me. And I think that there's probably a way to like collect data from a bunch of these different systems. I could put a heart rate sensor on like a watch that tracks like my heart rate and like my
Mm-hmm.
oxygen levels. I could put an accelerometer system like a Mantis or something else on the firearm. We have electronic targets now that track that data. We could put kestrels or weather stations all over the range. And if you can combine all that data together, I think it'd be really interesting to kind of paint that picture of like on this timeline, here's everything that happened for each shot.
Mm-hmm.
And you can then correlate like the wind picked up a little bit right before you pulled the shot. So it's plausible that like made that shot go a little bit right or a little bit left.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is like when you like having like very common like for somebody in Silicon Valley to be like, oh, let's add software and like solve this problem for everybody. But I didn't want to start by writing software. I wanted to start by like let's really just try to understand and explore these things and build out like little charts to track like one sensor at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did that as in article form. So I just publish it and share the data. And it's really just me exploring like if I was going to build software to do this, like let's explore one piece of at a time in public and just share what you learn. So the first article that I wrote that I published was based on this thing that I was hearing at the range at the time. So this was I was in Oregon. I was shooting at this great range that I'm a member to. It's called Tri-County Gun Club. And we were shooting this 600-yard match. It's everybody's action rifles. It's primarily people who shoot F-class, PRS, and FTR people there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm shooting this match, and one person is saying, hey, I'm not getting the velocity out of my firearm that I typically do. And at the time, there was an article going around from a different publication saying, like, if you don't like really hold your gun tight, you're going to lose velocity. Like if you shoot free recoil and like let the gun fly back, you're going to lose some velocity. And the person who demonstrated this like shot a few rounds and like was like, oh, see, like the lab radar is showing like this speed is a little bit lower. And I was like, hold on a second, like you didn't tell us like what the velocity typically is when you shoot out of this gun. You only shot like 2 rounds of each kind. Like that's not statistically significant. So I just applied a little bit more rigor. I recorded with a pressure trace, which records like chamber pressure. I recorded with a magnetospeed to track the velocity. I shot it on video and I did like 20 rounds each of like free recoil and then like holding the rifle tight. Then I measured like what's the weight of the gun. And I just did the math, right? Like what's the weight of the gun? What's the weight of the ammunition, like the bullet that's going to be leaving?
Mm-hmm.
And just did the math and I showed like there's no difference between these two things. Like the amount of the velocity was the same for me in both cases.
Mm-hmm.
The chamber pressure was the same in both cases. Like, and the math just doesn't prove out that has any impact on the velocity of the bullet, like how you hold it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like I published my results, and other people are like, I saw that article too, and I didn't see the same thing. So I'm glad you published this with some data to kind of back up the thing. And I emailed the other author just to say like, hey, listen, thanks for the opportunity for letting me explore this data, this subject in depth. They never responded, because I published a video, I published an article kind of disputing their results. But again, it's just really about me like applying more rigor to the things that I hear to see like, is there some truth to it? And
Mm-hmm.
again, it's without judgment. Like if that had actually had an impact, then that's great. We learned something new that we can do as shooters to
Exactly.
like get more consistent results, which is like the whole game. You want to have as consistent results as you can. So if we can learn things about like what's true, what's not true, what can you apply, and like what's just noise that you should ignore,
Mm-hmm.
I think that lets the whole industry and the whole field of competitive marksmanship just progress further.
Hey guys, before we get back to the podcast, I would like to introduce our newly designed and manufactured M5 bottom middle. It is designed and made in Canada, and some of the features you will get with that bottom middle is the opening that you have at the bottom of the trigger guard that will allow you to adjust the weight of your trigger. We also have a large ambidextrous magazine latch that is adjustable, so you can adjust the height of your magazine and make sure you have proper feeding. In the front here, we have a barricade stop that will allow you to put weight against the barricade you're shooting off of. You'll see we have it at a competitive price. So if you'd like to learn more, visit our website or follow the link in the description below. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Okay. And then from Ammolytics, you recently started the CAP Lite line of products.
Yeah.
All right. So what is the CAP Lite?
Yeah. Thanks for the intro on this. So similar to any other topic, like one thing that hit my radar was something that I didn't even know about before, which is that the powder that we use to reload our ammunition absorbs moisture from the air, absorbs water from the air. It's called hygroscopic, which just means that, it pulls water out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I think Brian Litz is the first one to publish an article on this topic in one of his books where it created a safety issue for him. So he lives, I think, up in Michigan, and he drives down to Arizona to shoot matches at the Southwest Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan is by several lakes, it's a peninsula, and so it's more humid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the issue, if I remember correctly, is he's reloading there. He had all his data for like what he was expecting out of the ammunition. He would drive down to Arizona, and then I don't know if he's reloading there, if he just brought some rounds that are already loaded, but essentially the powder dried out while I was in Arizona, and it created safety issues because if you're near the max velocity, or sorry, the max pressure for a cartridge in a humid environment, but then if that powder dries out, it will burn hotter because water doesn't burn. So if there's a little bit of water in the powder, it will reduce how much or how fast that powder will burn. So if it dries out more, it'll be a hotter powder.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe he drove down to Arizona, and it was like the primers were popping out of his rounds when he's shooting. So he's seeing all these pressure signs.
Mm-hmm.
And that led him to sort of explore this topic of like, what's happening with the powder, because he couldn't figure anything else out. So what he learned is that you can get velocity difference of like up to 200 to 250 feet per second difference just because of the humidity level in your powder, which is huge. Like that's the difference between like you're going to win this match and like you're never going to win this match because you're losing one. There's this variable that we just didn't know existed. So where it came across my radar, though, like I had seen something about the Brian Litz article, but then somebody reached out, the author of the Chronoplotter software. His name's Michael. He's become a friend. We chat all the time. So he wrote an article like exploring this in more depth, and he did an experiment where he put samples of powder in jars with like some Kestrel drops, which are these like little things that Kestrel makes to record like temperature and humidity, with these different Bovida packs. So these are these little two-way humidity packs. They're in humidors, and they come in different humidity levels. So this one's 32%, and they make like 50% and 80%. So he put these samples in these different jars and measured the weights of them over time as they've changed. Then he did a shooting experiment with them to shoot to see like what was the difference, and he verified the results of Brian Litz. So again, following the scientific method, verified the results. So if you watch a video from Brian, he will tell you like just take some of these packages and just throw them into the jugs of powder that you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that kind of bothered me. I was like, man, that seems kind of sloppy to me because this thing it's small, and if you throw it into like an 8-pound jug of powder, it's going to end up at the bottom. And humid air is more dense than less humid air, which means that if this is at the bottom and if your powder is dry, you're going to create like this pocket of humid air at the bottom, and then the air at the top. So this is covered in powder. Then there's going to be a pocket of air at the top that does not get any access to this because the humid air is going to stay at the bottom of the jug.
Yeah.
So that's one problem, is that like you're potentially going to create these inconsistent results within your jug of powder because like the powder at the bottom will see something different, a different humidity level than the powder at the top. But then the second thing that happens is like when you go to pour the powder into your trickler system, this is going to fall out, and then powder is going to splash everywhere, and you're going to have powder all over your reloading bench. We already have that problem in reloading. I'm sure you've done it too, where like you knocked a case over or you spilled powder. You double charge a thing, and then like powder's all over the place. Like I don't like having those problems. And with powder getting more and more expensive, like I want to treat it as a precious commodity.
I think it is.
It is exactly. So it seemed to me the wrong approach. Just throw these into the jugs. Well, the last thing I'll say is that occasionally these things can leak. They just have like a form of salt water inside, but if they get torn or if they get worn out, they'll start to leak a little bit, and then that will contaminate the powder. If that like salt water touch, like you're never going to know which grains of powder the liquid inside this touch. So I was like, there must be a better way to like put it at the top so that you can like remove it and swap these things out if they run out. and that it doesn't spill out all of your powder. So
I'm just going to
the
stop you real
oh
quick.
please.
So the Bovida packs, just to clarify, it controls humidity. It
Yes.
will absorb if the humidity is too high, and it will emit, right, the humidity if it's too low, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's good clarification. So these are two-way humidity packs, which is
Hmm.
different than desiccant, like those little silk that you have in your food.
Yeah.
A desiccant only absorbs moisture.
Hmm.
A two-way humidity pack maintains a consistent relative humidity. So this is a 32% relative humidity pack,
Hmm.
which means that whatever environment it's in, if it is in a drier environment than 32%, it will emit humidity to make
Hmm.
that environment closer to 32% relative humidity. If it's in a more humid environment, it will absorb moisture to try and make it closer to a 32% humidity environment.
Okay.
So, good clarification. So, this is different than desiccant. It will try and keep a consistent humidity level.
Perfect.
So it all started with like a sketch on a piece of paper to see like how could I design something that would like hold one of these packets near the top. And that's when I created like the first version, which is the original cap. And
Hmm.
these are like these 3D printed TPU little cages that would fit in the top of the jar. You put the thing in, then you like screw on the lid, and it would hold it. So I sold a few of those. It was more like an experiment to see like would people buy? Do these work? They do work, but they're really expensive to produce. I think these are like $80, and I not turn a profit on these. They were pretty expensive.
Hmm.
So then I started to explore like how can I make this cost effective? Because like I want people to be able to use these. It should not be like I have the money to do this kind of thing, and it should like last forever. But then also like when you make something that's this big, there's a lot of air in here, and then I'm paying to ship air. Like
Right.
not cost effective. So, you have to kind of apply these things from a design standpoint. So that's when I made the CAPLite, which is just like this little two-piece system. And it is a seal and a hanger. So they just kind of snap into each other. And the
Okay.
seal is silicone. Like it's just silicone rubber. It doesn't emit any humidity. It doesn't absorb any humidity. It's completely inert. And then the little plastic hanger piece is high density polyurethane. It's the exact same type of plastic that the jugs are made out of. So again,
Hmm.
like this, it's totally inert. So the idea of this is that it sits at the top around the rim of the jug for powder, and the silicone part acts like as like an O-ring to seal the jugs. The lid themselves, like they don't seal after the you pop the
The
foam seal,
foam. Yeah.
right? So they're no longer airtight.
Yeah.
So then you take one of these Bovida packs and you can fold it into this hanger, and it keeps it right at the top. So if you're reloading, you put these things in, you don't have to worry about it. When you are ready to pour some powder into your jug, you unscrew the cap, you pop this thing out, you see if it's empty or full, and then you go about your business. So again, like it was just me, like it's a little bit of the type A of like I don't want to just have these things floating around in my powder and like not knowing what's going on. I want to know what's going on because like
Hmm.
again, you're trying to eliminate variables. So these like are much more cost effective. They come in like a small package, so I'm not no longer shipping air. I ship them with one of the Bovida packs of 32%, and they retail for $20 US. So much more cost effective for me, much more cost effective for the shooters who use them. And they've been really great. Like they've worked super well. They come in two sizes. I have them for the red one is intended for like the Hodgin and Shooters World 8-pound jugs. I think it also fits the Alliant 5-pound jugs, and
Hmm.
then a smaller one that fits like the Vitivori.
Yeah.
So this will fit their 1 pound and 8-pound jugs. I think they have a 5-pound jug as well that I saw recently. But so the great thing about this is that I can also expand the design to fit different sizes of jugs. Two questions I get a lot are like, when are you going to make one for 1 pound jugs for like Hodgin and other pounds
Hmm.
of other sizes of jugs? That's coming. But then the other one that I think would be interesting is to have an even larger one that will fit in your trickler system, so that if you leave your powder in your trickler system overnight, like a lot of us do, you're maintaining the humidity level in there while you're reloading.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what the genesis that led us this is just like me being uncomfortable with like just throwing these packages right into my powder.
Yeah. So I usually reload here in my basement, and I have this humidity, readers that I leave everywhere just to see what's happening in the basement. And in winter, usually we're about maybe 30%, but then summer comes and that just shoots to like 70%, right? And
Right.
I usually keep my powder in, my cabinet right here, and Yeah, I've never thought about this before until I think we met at SHOT Show maybe 2 years ago, and you gave me one of
Yeah.
those samples, and I've
Yep.
been using it like since then. I think it's something that maybe we don't think about, but it's very important, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of open questions out there. And I think the thing that people don't think about with this is anytime you're exposing the powder to air, the air that you're exposing it to is going to be different than what it was at the factory.
Hmm.
So again, we talked about putting the powder from your jug into your trickler system. Now it's exposed to the air. If you leave it there overnight, like that powder has changed. Then you're going to dump it from your trickler system back into the jug, and now it's changing the powder that's in the jug too. So it's really like anything else in reloading, it's about how do you eliminate variability?
Hmm.
And changing the humidity level of the powder is a variable that you have control over if you are like not sloppy about it. But first, you have to know that it's a thing that will affect your powder and affect your muzzle velocity. So I think the example you gave is like over the course of the year, the humidity levels in your area in the basement you're reloading are going to change all the time. Like if it
Hmm.
if it rains, a rainstorm comes through, like it's going to be more humid that week. And if you reload that weekend when it happens to be raining, like that's going to affect the powder while it's sitting in your jug. And it does not
Yeah.
take as long as you might think for the powder to absorb that moisture. I've run several experiments to kind of measure over time how much it changes, but even within like a few hours, 24 hours by certainly you're going to have some effects. And I think it starts to stabilize after 48 hours or so. That powder is going to change. So if you leave it in your trickler system for, I don't know, 4 hours, like it will be different than when you originally first started reloading. So having some way to eliminate that variability will go a long way towards like improving the precision of your firearm and your that component, the ammunition component.
And you said 32% is the Bovida packs you're using. So that brings me to the next question of, is it the best to have 32% or it's more the consistency? So if it's 40 or 50, at least it's consistent to what you are usually shooting.
I would say that it is more important to be consistent for whatever
Hmm.
it is you want to shoot. The powder manufacturers will recommend the storage of your powder to be around 50 to 60% relative to humidity.
Hmm.
The data that I've seen on this, both from people who have done these experiments on their own and from one major powder manufacturer who I will not name yet, the data shows that 32% is a safe range for the experiments that have been run. I will caveat for anybody that's reloading, like it is a dangerous activity to do. You should always be careful when you're reloading, no matter what. So if you're going to run 32%, like don't start with a max pressure charge.
Hmm.
Start, follow the best practices for reloading. Work up your load to figure out what the max is for you and your ammo and your gun and see like what is the max charge if I'm storing it at 32%. But this is the kind of thing that I expect reloading manuals in the future to change to incorporate like this powder for this load that we are demonstrating the data for was stored at this percentage, sorry, this relative humidity percentage to
Hmm.
kind of let the folks know who are reloading based off those manuals like give that little bit more information. So I expect that's going to change in the future to incorporate that data. So 32% in my testing has been completely safe, and the testing that I've seen completely safe. And this is both measuring not just muzzle velocity, looking for pressure signs, but also with a pressure trace that measures chamber pressure. But again, like if you're reloading, um, follow the best practices, be safe,
Yeah.
and work your load back up to make sure you're being safe. The one caveat I'll also point out is don't use desiccant, which always removes humidity from the air and doesn't add it back.
Hmm.
That can get you down to like the 10 to 15% humidity level, and that can be where like you can have safety issues. So powder manufacturers do not recommend desiccant. I will use it in some experiments, but again, I'm doing like the minimum charge and I'm being as safe as I can to figure out like, how much more pressure is this adding? But based on what I've seen, like when you get down to the 10% humidity levels, like that's when you're in like unsafe territory. So be careful with that.
Okay. And then there was this question that I asked you before. I reloaded in my basement. My basement is at, let's say, 50, or I have my Povita packs at 32, and then I left it in my basement for 2 weeks before I go to my match. What
Yeah.
happens to my ammo? Is my ammo considered to be a sealed container, or a little bit, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think Brian Litz called this out in his article about this as well, which is you cannot rely on the ammunition after you've loaded it to be airtight,
Hmm.
because the first, like the primer pockets themselves, might not be perfectly round, which means that when you put a primer in there, there could be a little air gap that allows, moist air to go in, or the moist air inside the cartridge, if it's more dry outside, to
Hmm.
leave. So you'll get inconsistency with that one round. Some rounds might be more well sealed than others. So you might have some rounds, like if you were to reload 2 weeks before match and it's stored in an environment that has like changing humidity levels, you may experience that some rounds that are more leaky, let's just call them leaky, they're not
Hmm.
as well sealed. Those might have different velocities than the rounds that are well sealed. Let's say that there's some rounds are airtight. So what I like to do is I put all the ammunition that I've loaded into an ammo box, and then I throw in an extra one of the Bovida packs, either inside the box or in a Ziploc bag with the ammo box, just to maintain that same level of relative humidity while I'm storing the ammo. And I keep it in that bag until I am at the range and pull it out of the bag and I'm ready to shoot. Because if it's exposed for a couple minutes, like that's fine. The powder is going to change so much in a few minutes during the match than like if it's sitting around for 2 weeks. So again, it's all about just following some best practices to eliminate any variability in your ammunition so that you can have a good match.
And did you have the chance, or did you try this testing on primers, or you didn't reach that area yet?
It's a good question. I have run a very simple experiment for which I don't have a lot of data yet
Hmm.
to measure. If I store primers, I think I'd use like a tray of 100 primers just to get more data, because like the primers don't weigh much to begin with.
Right.
And if the weight of them, the mass of them only changes by like 1% or less than 1%, it's really hard to measure any difference there. So I used a tray of 100 and
Hmm.
I stored them. I'm trying to remember exactly how I ran it, 'cause it's been a while since I did this. I think I stored them in like a 50% humidity environment. I measured the full tray before, then the full tray after, and I didn't notice any difference in weight. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it is an experiment I like to explore further.
Hmm.
But I didn't that storing them. I can't remember exactly what humidity level, so don't quote me on that. I'll have to follow up with you on that.
That's fine.
But I did store them in with a humidity pack for a while. I think like a few days, and I didn't notice any change in mass, and I didn't notice any changes in velocity when I was shooting them at the range. So,
Okay.
uh, inconclusive at this time, but it is something I want to explore further.
Yeah, because you were just talking about the powder, and then I was thinking, where do I store my primers? I usually store them in ammo cans with like humidity packs, but
Yep.
not two-way humidity packs. And now I'm thinking, was that correct or not correct? But I guess I'll wait for your results of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to exploring that as well.
All right. So the last thing we want to talk about, you have posted a recent experiment on your Instagram
Yep.
with regards to the powder in your dispenser.
Yeah.
So what was the
Yeah.
experiment?
Yeah, so it's not in my dispenser, but it is on my scale. So a lot of questions I get about the CAPLite are like, how long do the packs last?
Hmm.
The two-way humidity Bovida packs, and how long does it take for like the full jug of powder to absorb or to stabilize and like use whatever the humidity pack is that you're running in there, and then like how long can I leave it in my trickler system before I consider it contaminated? So there's a lot of these questions about like the length of time it takes for like a certain amount of powder to absorb or remove moisture to get to the level that you want it to be. So it's the lab grade scales that we run now. Like I have an A&D FX120.
Hmm.
The scales that we have, like they're very precise and very accurate for small sample sizes. You can't put a 1 pound jug of powder in there and measure it. Like it's more weight than it's capable of measuring.
Right.
But um, it can measure smaller sample sizes. So I had this idea of like, what if I could create like a sealed environment around my scale and just track the weight over time instead of like setting up the scale and pulling, a sample out of like some storage environment and then weighing it, then putting it back in and writing down the results over time. Well, these scales are capable of like sending the data out to a computer because they have a serial port in the back, which is how like these trickler systems work that are computerized. Like they
Yeah.
just read from the scale themselves. So I don't have to write it down. And then I have a bunch of these Kestrel drops that will track the humidity and temperature and dew point over time. So I don't have to write that down.
Hmm.
So I decided just to create like a sealed chamber around my scale and set it up in such a way that I could track the all this data inside the chamber and outside the chamber and the weight of the sample over time, without having to write out down all the information. And then just we can see on a chart like how it's changing over time. Quick overview of the setup that I have here. The purpose of this experiment is to track changes in a sample of Vitivory N140 powder over time using a A&D scale that's connected to a Raspberry Pi, which is off camera. It collects samples of the weight of the sample as frequently as the scale will send it. And then inside the chamber, I have this orange Kestrel drop that's attached, and the green one is outside the chamber. So this is tracking the relative humidity, the temperature, and the dew point of the environment, both inside the sealed chamber and outside over time, so I can correlate that data with the weight of the sample of this powder over time. Also inside the chamber, I have at the top a CAP Lite with a Bovida 32% humidity pack, which is reflected on these two hygrometers. This top hygrometer is on the outside of the chamber. The bottom one is on the inside. These are just here for visualization purposes so that people watching the time-lapse video can see both of them. But you'll see that the inside the relative humidity inside the chamber is a little bit lower than outside the chamber. For this volume of space, this is a pretty small pack. It is less. This is much more space than you would see inside of a powder jug, especially one that's full of powder. But for the purposes of this experiment, that's totally acceptable. It's allowing us to track the changes in relative humidity outside and then inside, just to demonstrate the effectiveness of the CAPLite and of these Bovida packs and the impacts of relative humidity on the powder sample.
Hmm.
So for the past week, I've been running this experiment where I have a sample of, it's 30 grams of Vitivory N140 powder. 30
Yeah.
grams translates to like 420 or 462 grains of powder. So that's about 19 rounds of 24 grains, which is like 24 grains of powder is what I would put into a 223 round. So it's
Okay.
about 19 rounds worth of powder. So almost a full match worth.
Hmm.
So I just tracked this over time. So first I ran it at ambient, the ambient temperature and humidity, which is whatever it is inside my house, for 48 hours, and just track to see how the powder sample changed over time. And then track to see like what the temperature and humidity changed as well, inside and outside the chamber. But then I just double-sided taped one of the cap lights to the top of the chamber inside
Hmm.
and put in a Bovida pack, a 32% humidity pack, and then started tracking that. And I've done that experiment for like the past 5 days or so. And you can see a big shift in like the humidity like gets much more consistent, even as like the temperature and the ambient temperature outside the chamber changes. So it's been really interesting. I do have some preliminary data, but I want to continue the experiment with some desiccant just to see how far out I can dry the powder, and then put in a 52% or 58% humidity pack to see how heavy I can get that powder to be over time. So the end result of this will be like a time lapse video just to show like the scale itself. You'll see like the weight changing over time, and then I have two uh display hygrometers. There's one inside the chamber, one outside the chamber. Those are just for visualization purposes so people can see how it's changing over time as the time lapse video goes on. But the real data comes from like the Kestrel drops inside and outside the chamber, and then the scale itself, which is just outputting the results to a Raspberry Pi that's collecting it.
Hmm.
So again, like with any of my experiments, I'll publish all the data so people can see, and I'll do an explainer video with a chart of the full data set, just to like help answer some of these questions about like this is how long it takes for powder to change its weight in a given environment of a certain humidity level. So I think there'll be a lot of things that we'll learn from that, but it should be just interesting to watch over time as well.
When are you expecting to publish the results?
So I'm expecting to publish the first version, which is ambient and 32% within the next couple of days. So today
Okay.
is Sunday, July 26th. So within the next 2 days, I'll publish the first one, and then I'll do a follow up when I have more results of drying it out with desiccant and then re humidifying it with a 60% humidity pack. So I'll probably run those experiments for a week each. So it'll be 2 more weeks until I have the results of those experiments.
Perfect. And the results are always on your website. Do you usually make a post on Instagram or something saying like the results of this experiment is out?
Yeah, so the articles I publish to blog.ammolytics.com, and then I have a YouTube channel, it's YouTube/Ammolytics, and
Hmm.
then I also post to the Instagram as well. So I usually will do some like behind the scenes videos on Instagram and the YouTube shorts, just so people can kind of see like what it looks like behind the scenes, like what does this experiment look like. And I'll also publish the 3D printed models for the little hangers that I made for the hygrometers and for the kestrels, because again, like and for the seal ring at the bottom for the acrylic tube that's going around the
Hmm.
scale to make the chamber. Because again, like with any experiment, it's only science if like other people are trying to reproduce the results. So I want to let people know, here's exactly how I did it, here's how you can do it too, here's the instructions to set up the experiment on your own. By all means, like publish your results and see what worked for you, and hopefully we get other people to try this out as well.
That's awesome. All right, so the cap lights, we're gonna start carrying them at Precision Zone. So Eric, you're gonna be sending us a few of those, and we'll have them on our website. With regards to your website and your YouTube channel, we'll have them listed in the description of the video down below. Or if you're listening on Spotify, you'll have it in the description as well. Eric, thank you so much for your time and for all the information you have, uh, you know, told us. And I'm really looking forward to the next time we can have another episode and talk about more experiments, especially if you get to the primers side of experiments a little bit.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to come back and share the results. Thanks for having me today, Sharif.
Eric, thank you so much. I appreciate it.